So last year, during E3, Xbox showed off a bunch of new games. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, Psychonauts 2, I don't know, some Halo game probably. I remember everyone on the TL being hyped and live tweeting the whole conference. Lots of games, lots of memes.
You're breathtaking. You're all breathtaking.
As a horror fan, there was one title that stood out to me. You already know if you read the title of this video, but the game is Blair Witch. The Blair Witch Project is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Despite that, I have never seen a movie that has split an audience so much. Every time I ask someone what they think of the movie, they either say that it's super boring or it's great. Like, there's no in between. No one ever says, yeah, it's an okay movie. Anyway, it would be an understatement to say that I was just a little excited about the release. Unfortunately, by the time it came out, I forgot all about it. Until recently when I got Xbox Game Pass to play Dishonored 2 for Billob's Game Club. On a side note, you should check out Billob's channel. He's like 2.4 times cooler than me, plus he has better taste in games. Anyway, on Game Pass, I was looking for other games I could play alongside Dishonored and ended up finding Blair Witch. I looked on How Long to Beat, saw that it was only 5 hours long, and said fuck it. Okie dokie, first impression time. I feel like the Black Hills Forest was well done. It's very open, or at least Bloober Team did a good job at making it seem like it was very open. And when nighttime rolls around, it gets pretty spooky. The atmosphere is key to both horror games and movies alike. Without a good atmosphere and sound design, it would be extremely difficult to scare anyone. And those are two things this game has going for it, just like the original movie. Unfortunately, this doesn't amount to much as the game is super boring. I understand that there is a run-on joke that most modern horror games are walking simulators, and it definitely has been a trend starting with PT. For the most part, I am fine with those types of games, but Blair Witch does this thing where it tries to shove half-baked gameplay mechanics down your throat to keep things interesting. However, they were not fleshed out enough to keep me entertained, and as a result, end up getting in the way of me being scared. Ah, my dog is barking. There must be enemies nearby. Time to shine my flashlight on them to make them go away. Or like skimming through a videotape and stopping at the right frame to make an item appear in heaven knows where because everything in the woods looks the same to me. On top of that, it's extremely dark, so I'm always losing my dog, and because the dog's gone, Ellis freaks out, which makes it even harder to find him. I swear, if you play this game, you'll be so focused on figuring out where the hell your dog is that you won't even be scared. This leads to a very tedious and unsatisfying experience that I am not super into no matter how great the atmosphere is. I only played for about an hour until I quit feeling upset and disappointed that I wasted my time on it. Fortunately, this game does have one redeeming feature. You get to pet our dog. You get to pet our dog. You get to pet our dog. Anyway, after playing, I went on a Google journey to find other people to validate my opinions. And I found out that there are 3 other Blair Witch games, all by different developers that were released shortly after the first movie. So I got copies of all those games, not knowing whether or not any of them would work on Windows 10 like a dumbass. Fortunately, after an hour and a half of troubleshooting, I finally got them to work. So it's July 1999, the Blair Witch Project just opened in theaters, and every horror fan is arguing whether or not the footage in the film is real. Of course, we now know that, yeah, it's just acting, but all of the marketing that led up to this film's release was bonkers. Missing posters for the actors, manipulated IMDb records to make it seem like said actors were missing and presumed dead. The marketing team posting all over blog sites and chat rooms to stir the pot. And a fucking lore dump of a website, which was a genius idea, especially since the internet was booming. The marketing was on some Cannibal Holocaust type fuckery, but they did it more successfully and without catching a case. This movie was so successful that it single-handedly revived the found footage genre, and just like any other blockbuster hit, there had to be a video game adaptation. So a deal was made with the founder of Gathering of Developers, Mike Wilson, which, on a side note, I did not know that he was one of the guys who founded Devolver Digital. Anyway, he made a deal to publish 3 Blair Witch games around Halloween time to keep this Blair Witch money train chugging. So Wilson got 3 different studios to make their own game detailing the past events referenced in the movie, creating prequels to avoid any inconsistencies that were likely to come up, as a sequel to the film was also in the works around the same time. The developers of the first game in the trilogy were Terminal Reality, a company that up until this point has mostly put out flight simulators and monster truck racing games, which seems like the last studio you would want to work on a horror game, but they also had this little game named Nocturne under their belt. Can I ask you a question? Why the hell are you planning to vote for Kingdom Hearts 2? Where was Kingdom Hearts 2 during Hurricane Katrina? Riddle me that. Pro tip, you can't. Which is exactly why Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is the better game. Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne would never take advantage of your innate gullibility, and that is evidence of a game that will fight for you and me until the end. So vote for Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. So apparently there is another Nocturne game that is not a JRPG developed by Atlus. I never heard of it until now, and I don't think others have either. I think it's because it was a Windows exclusive at a time when the survival horror genre was pretty much console-based. You had your Resident Evils, Silent Hills, Fatal Frames, and Clock Towers. All of these games were mainly stuck on consoles and still are, except for Resident Evil, because Capcom is about their bag. This could be why it flew under the radar for so many people. Apparently there were plans to port Nocturne to the Dreamcast to prevent the game from dying, but those plans were cancelled when the Dreamcast died first. Anyway, Terminal Reality already had an engine for a survival horror game, which served as a proper foundation for the Blair Witch Trilogy, the first of which being Blair Witch Volume 1 Rustin Parr. This game takes place shortly after the massacre of the Burkittsville 7. If you're not in the know, basically, Rustin Parr is this hermit who lives outside Burkittsville. After living a mostly peaceful life in the woods, he started seeing a woman who would speak to him in a strange language. Over time, this would get worse, and she would tell him to kidnap and murder a group of children from Burkittsville. After the deed was done, the lady told Parr to confess, and then she would leave him alone, so he did and was arrested, claiming that an old woman ghost told him to do it. This event had somehow caught the attention of Spook House, a classified government agency specializing in paranormal investigation. After some training and a mission brief, Agents Doc and Stranger are sent to Burkittsville to investigate the woods and the town. Both the Spook House organization and the agents in this game are from Nocturne, meaning that Blair Witch Volume 1 is somewhat of a Nocturne sequel / crossover. Although it's technically a sequel, it can be played as a standalone game. Prior knowledge of Spook House or the characters is not at all necessary to understand any part of this game, and this is mostly due to it leaning heavily on Blair Witch lore and taking a lot of inspiration from a show I very much enjoy, Twin Peaks. Within the first 30 minutes of playing, it becomes super clear that the devs love Twin Peaks. And to be completely honest, who doesn't? Everything down from a government agent going to a small town in the middle of nowhere to investigate a murder that turns out to be caused by an interdimensional entity who possesses people and makes them do hood rat stuff with their friends, to a very quirky cast of characters that all have something going for them. And if that isn't clear enough, Dale Cooper is literally in the game. He's just there. Don't get too close to him though, he's not the gentleman that he pretends to be. He tried to shove his tongue down my throat on the first date. But yeah, it's nice to see that the devs have taste, and I always welcome Twin Peaks references. Though the vibes aren't as strong as they are in the Deadly Premonition series, there's still enough to make me smile. You know what else about this game makes me smile? It's definitely not the gameplay, I tell you what, but more on that later. It's the cutscenes. Ma'am. Ma'am, are you okay?
I hate to pry, but what brings you to the town of Burkittsville anyway?
She does this spinning thing almost any time you try to talk to someone, and I don't know if it's because I have a 13-year-old sense of humor or what, but this makes me laugh every time. And like, the other person's head will be moving back and forth trying to keep up with you. Doc's jacket is always flowing in the air even when inside, and her character model never knows what to do in any situation. On top of that, the writing and voice acting is not the best. All this jank at once is a recipe to keep me laughing non-stop even during the most serious moments in the game. There's just too much to unpack in cutscenes like this.
Colonel, the FBI sent agents to assist the local sheriff, and their reports lead us to believe there's more at work in that little town than the actions of one insane old man. Parr told police that he killed for an old woman ghost that lives in the woods. Well, that began the local recirculation of legends about the Blair Witch.
Anyway, gameplay. That's a thing. When you're not walking around town and talking to folks, you will be in the Black Hills Forest, home of the Blair Witch. I can't say that Terminal Reality was spot on with their portrayal of the woods. They definitely got the part where it's large and easy to get lost because I sure as hell had my eyes glued to the map. Even after hours of running around these woods, I still couldn't memorize routes to get to where I needed to go. However, much of the overall vibe of the Black Hills Forest was kind of lost in the adaptation, but thankfully not entirely. When there are no enemies about, the woods have the grim vibe that I'm looking for, like something is watching me and I'm not supposed to be here. That vibe doesn't stay too long though, because shortly after you first enter the woods, enemies will start spawning, and they won't stop until you're dead. You always have several weapons on you, but they're quite useless when everything is a bullet sponge, and for every enemy you kill, there are probably 2 more around the next corner. It's totally ridiculous how everyone on the dev team thought this was a-okay. I spent most of my time in the woods juking demon dogs and invisible monsters, which is way harder to do in any other survival horror game I've played. And that is all because of the sheer amount of enemies that will be on the same screen as you and how loose the controls are. I've never complained about tank controls before. In Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and every other game I've played, they were pretty solid. I don't know if it's because I'm a big baby or if it's the fact that I'm playing on a keyboard, but the controls are not it. On top of the pointless enemies that shan't be bothered with, the bosses are pretty lackluster. There are 3 bosses in total. The first one is a ghost scorpion you just have to shoot until it's gone. It's pretty simple and not difficult at all. My brain needs challenging and I'm not getting it here. Now the second boss is the brain teaser I was looking for. In this fight you have to kick over piles of rocks, then shoot the stick monster until it's gone. But not even this fight has anything on the final challenge you must face. This has to be the best thing in any video game ever. I can't even put into words how perfect this boss fight is. Better than Psycho Mantis, better than Kefka, and definitely better than the Great Mighty Pooh. But in all seriousness though, this is one of those games that I like everything about except for actually playing it. If that makes any sense at all. It probably doesn't. It has a lot of personality, and it's a charming game, it's just super wonky and filled with jank. The next game, however, has a little less jank, but it comes at the cost of its personality. So the second game in the trilogy is Blair Witch Volume 2, The Legend of Coffin Rock. It was developed by Human Head Studios and was their first game after many of the developers left Raven Software and formed the company. I looked through their other games because the logo seemed familiar to me, and they are also the ones who developed Brink and Prey. Not the new one, but the one with all the cool Native American spirit world stuff. Blair Witch Volume 2 takes place before the events of Volume 1, all the way back to the Civil War. You play as a Union soldier with amnesia who is given the name Lazarus by an old lady who helps him recover from his injuries. And then she immediately throws him out and forces him to find her granddaughter who was taken by the Black Hills Forest. So you go out on an adventure into the woods to find this little girl that you don't really care about, meeting all sorts of interesting characters along the way and shooting ghosts, because that works apparently. You will also get a flashback every 2 steps you take as you slowly get your memories back. So throughout the game, you constantly switch between shooting at ghosts and shooting at Confederate soldiers. Though it's pretty boring, I will admit that the combat in this game isn't as fucked as it is in the first game, as enemies will go down after only a few shots. Which is great seeing as you actually have to kill all the enemies to continue, unlike Volume 1 where you can just run past everything. One thing I have an issue with combat wise is that early on, the game conditions you to use your cross to defeat ghosts, and when you see more ghosts later on, your first instinct is to get out the cross and expel them, right? No! I tried that and they said, "Fuck your cross," and jumped me. I've never felt so disrespected in my life. While playing this game, 2 things were made abundantly clear to me. Number 1, this game is not scary. With this game being more action-oriented and most of the enemies being Confederate soldiers, this game is about as scary as a Call of Duty game. The only thing that came close to scaring me was the missing poster that definitely wasn't taken and printed out at the nearest Chuck E. Cheese. I wanted to talk about these because the third game has them too. They didn't even bother dressing up for these photos. There's a guy clearly wearing a t-shirt before they were invented. And number 2, this game is extremely easy. There's a lot of hand-holding. You will not be able to leave an area until you do what you're supposed to, and even when you do the you are only allowed to go in the right direction, which is pretty much the polar opposite of what Volume 1 did. However, I will say that this game can be quite annoying when it comes to enemies and items. There's just so many ghosts everywhere, and these little bastards are impossible to hit without getting damaged. On top of that, they are almost impossible to see as well. The healing Twanas are shared between your past and present self, which makes sense. They only restore 20% of your health and you don't even get that many. I restarted the game twice, and by the time I made it to the first boss I had low health and no Twanas, so I just gave up on trying to finish this game. It's not fun and I'm not invested, so why bother? Blair Witch Volume 3 The Elly Kedward Tale was developed by Ritual Entertainment. Unlike the companies that worked on the other games, Ritual hasn't really done anything notable. Pretty much everything they've developed has been in collaboration with another studio or expansion packs for games like Quake and Delta Force. Nothing spooky, which explains why this game is extremely action heavy, more so than the last. This one is actually not based on a story mentioned in the movie. You play as former priest turned witch hunter Jonathan Pry. He goes to Blair to find out what happened to Elly Kedward, a woman who is accused of witchcraft when she was caught drawing blood from children for rituals. She was banished from Blair by way of, "We're gonna send you out into the woods tied to a wheelbarrow and hope you die. Good luck." But somehow she didn't die and her body disappeared. Also, evil has taken over the town, so yeah, it's your job to fix everything. With the help of this guy who lives in the woods and a different witch, you must put an end to whatever evil spirit lives in the Black Hills Forest. This game is way more actiony than the previous games in the series and is somehow the only one that makes the combat work. The bosses, though there are very few, were fun to beat, and your everyday enemies drop health, mana, and ammo, so if you just want to chill and shoot everything you can. The controls are still a bit awkward, but the blame goes to the engine for that. The design of the Black Hills Forest is somewhat in the middle of Volume 1's "Good luck finding your way out of here" and Volume 2's "Oh, don't go over there, come here. Come here. Come here." The map is kind of just a box with Coffin Rock in the center and trails leading off of it. At the beginning of the game, each of these trails just loop around to the opposite side of the map, but as you continue playing, you learn how to get to other areas using the trails. If you ever start to think that the woods are too samey and want a change of scenery, then feel free to travel to the local amusement parks. And by amusement parks, I mean the spirit and demon realm, where there is no amusement sadly, only killing evil spirits and saving Native American children who bring you gifts. These parts of the games are alright, though they are extremely linear. Instead of being a proper dungeon, it's just a series of rooms tied together in a line. You would be lucky to get a puzzle in one, and even then it would be very simple. I think the puzzle in the last dungeon was just collect 5 skulls and put them on pedestals. The order doesn't matter, you just have to put them there. I mean, you don't have to go all out on puzzles like Silent Hill, but please, just give me something to do other than shooting corpses. Besides the straightforward gameplay, there isn't much I can say about this game. It's just okay. Easily the most polished game in the trilogy, even though like the others it still crashes a lot and has quite a few glitches, but I totally blame some of that on me playing a Windows XP game on Windows 10. Speaking of glitches, I couldn't finish the game. I could explain why, but I feel like it would be better if I just show you.
I don't have the strength to open the door.
I've tried getting through this door several times and nope, the game doesn't want me to. I've tried skipping the cutscene before my character flies to the moon and the game crashes. Other than playing this game in a virtual machine, I haven't the slightest idea as to how I could get past this. So I'm not gonna try. I'm pretty sure that's the final boss anyway, and there's YouTube if I want to see what happens, so it's all good. So, after playing all of the Blair Witch games that exist, I feel it's only right to rank them and then immediately be judged by everyone watching. So, at the bottom of our ranking, I have Blair Witch Volume 2, The Legend of Coffin Rock. This is weird because even though I have strong negative opinions about Blair Witch 2019 and I don't really have anything to say about this game, I still got more enjoyment out of Blair Witch. This is why I put it at the bottom. Volume 2 is the definition of mid. Second to last, we have the new Blair Witch. I unloaded all of my complaints about this game earlier. It's a glorified walking simulator and none of the mechanics can save it from being a boring game to play. However, the atmosphere is great and I love petting the dog, so that's what it has going for it. My second favorite game was Blair Witch Volume 3, The Elly Kedward Tale. This was the game that had the least amount of bugs and general jankiness and did combat the best out of all the games. It's not that scary, but it's pretty fun to play. I still wouldn't recommend it, though the one game I would has to be Blair Witch Volume 1 Rustin Parr. The first Blair Witch game was the one to do it right. This game has so much charm and a whole bunch of horror references to add to it. I might just be biased because I'm a Twin Peaks fan, but I really enjoyed this game. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than the rest. If you like Blair Witch, feel free to try out these games, but if you didn't like the movie, don't bother. It's not worth your time. You know what is worth your time? Joining my wonderful Discord server, where you can get channel updates and sneak peeks at my future videos, or if you want to talk to me and others about video games, movies, TV shows, or music. I like music. come recommend me some music please. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.